Hi, thank you for joining us. You're listening to a special program on KPFK 90.7 FM for the Zeitgeist Media Festival 2014, coming up here shortly. We have special guests with us today, including Jason Lord and Sharleen Bezegi, and you may have heard of him, Peter Joseph, the original writer-director of the Zeitgeist movie trilogy. Now, the Zeitgeist Media Festival is coming up October 4th at the Federal in North Hollywood, California. For additional information, you can go to the Zeitgeist Media Festival. It's www.zeitgeistmediafestival.org for tickets. And also, if you listen closely, we'll have a ticket giveaway later in the show. First, I want to introduce Jason Lord, who has been a long-time contributor involved with the Zeitgeist movement. He's the California State Coordinator since its inception, I understand. And for this event, the Zeitgeist Media Festival, Jason is the technical coordinator. You also work for the studios full-time in television, I understand?
Yes, I have a full-time career working in Hollywood, film, lighting, and television. Right now I'm working on a sitcom, but yeah, my background's in lighting for feature film.
Excellent. Well, welcome to the show, and thank you for your efforts with the Zeitgeist Media Festival. Also with us is Sharleen Bezegi, who is the global event coordinator for what has now become the Zeitgeist movement. And for the Media Festival, you're the production coordinator. Welcome.
Thank you.
Excellent. Well, maybe you can tell us, what does a production coordinator do in this instance?
Well, just bring together all of the pieces, from the talent to the crew, the people involved, the partners, the volunteers, the venue staff.
Excellent.
And the promotion.
A lot of moving pieces.
Yes.
A lot of spinning wheels to keep coordinating. Excellent. Well, and finally, with us, Peter Joseph. Many of you will recall, for sure, the Zeitgeist film trilogy. He was the writer and director of that and has since gone on to create many related media content. I know recently he's had a series on YouTube that's been very popular called CID, or Culture in Decline. Perhaps you can tell us a little bit more about that later. Peter also co-author of the book titled The Zeitgeist Movement Defined, which I don't know if it's a bestseller yet, or if the New York Times has perhaps even blacked it out, if they're willing to give it to that much attention. Peter, welcome to our show.
Oh, thank you, Dutch. I appreciate it. And speaking of culture in decline, your cameos always make for great quality.
Absolutely.
It's good to see how deep the family runs in this general community. And I would comment regarding Sharleen that she's also known as the saving grace of the Zeitgeist movement, because coordination issues that come forward are no easy task, and there's plenty of wonderful credits that have been accomplished that move so quickly, sadly enough, where people forget how amazing that one accomplishment was.
Yeah.
And of course, Jason and the LA chapter, the LA chapter is one of the reasons I continue to remain in this distorted place known as Los Angeles, in all of its wonderful inefficiency that reminds me of multiple tiers of needed change that are required in this world in order for some sanity to be kept and maintain general health. But thank you for that introduction. And
well, speaking of LA, just off the cuff, I live here myself and originally from Detroit. And if you look at the pattern of movement of people from the east to the west across the United States, it seems to have gotten more and more disjointed as you move west. There's cities with a functional system like New York with, underground subways and roads that are gridded out and make sense. And then you come all the way to L.A., and I mean, it takes a map and a GPS and a homing pigeon to find your way around.
It's treacherous. It's the amount of time we waste enduring inefficiency is worthy of a documentary in and of itself.
Yeah, decentralization in its greatest form.
I'd say some kind of decentralization can be strategic and can work very well depending on how it's organized. There's plenty of good claims for decentralization, but with a broad systems context. So that's an argument that we could address as far as what a decentralized concept really means versus a decoupled concept where nothing's interrelating. And that's a big problem.
Yeah, well, I think that sort of says L.A. better than anything else. Nothing interrelating. Have you been on the 405 lately?
Yes, every day, thank you.
You should all be surprised I'm here at all, given my experience on the 101.
So this is the 4th annual Zeitgeist Media Festival. Jason, perhaps you can give us a note, some of the magical whiz-bangery that's going to be there, the videos and music and...
Yeah, absolutely. A mixture of comedy, music, bands, solo acts. We'll see short films. You'll see a lot of art on display. But everything has like a socially conscious message. It's not just people there promoting their album for their own livelihood, for their own album's sake. Everything there is to speak out about society, problems in society, changes that we need to the political, economic, and also the traditional thinking changes of the time. Coming to the festival is getting exposed to a lot of these things through artistic modes, which is very different than when you approach them through, say, an academic mode or through a political mode, where people are very polarized in their view and they're pushing an agenda. And here you're just getting exposure through an emotional expression, which has a profound impact over time.
I would just chime in to say that, in contrast to Z-Day, so if you should
Yes,
mention
absolutely.
Z-Day and mention how these two pair up.
Sure. In March, earlier in the year, we have another global event day called Z-Day or Zeitgeist Day. We say Z-Day for short. And that day is oriented towards more the academic attributes of what we're advocating with a resource-based economic model. And we go into the system structure and the system breakdowns and how monetary economics creates the problems that we see in society and that there's system outcomes. And we go into what we're actually advocating with transitioning away from a monetary system. We go into what a societal structure looks like where we are motivated through cooperation versus through competition. And it speaks to a different crowd. It speaks to a more academic crowd. And
Right.
there's a lot of learning going on. And if you came to our Z-Day event this year, locally here in LA, you'd see a lot of displays oriented towards concepts such as technological unemployment or economic inequality or the cyclical consumption in our society, and we keep wasting and wasting. And we go in on a very different tact. Like I'll speak always on the correlation of economic inequality and problems in a society, or I'll speak about systems approach and systems theory, which are great terms academically, but then when you come to a media festival, we switch things around, and now we're expressing through music, we're expressing through poetry, we're expressing through films and short films and videos. And it creates a very different atmosphere. And there's still learning going on, but it's not the academic, technical learning that you might get at a Zeitgeist Day event. We're bringing that into the culture with the media
The
festival.
power of art to
Yeah,
inspire.
Exactly.
Exactly.
That's a timeless theme of humanity
Mm-hmm.
from the earliest painters. So essentially, Z-Day is in contrast to the Zeitgeist Media Fest. In one is more analytical, let's talk about solutions, let's do a lot of thinking and sharing, and the other one is more experiential, let's entertain and enthuse and engage at that level.
Yeah, at one it's like the technical versus the creative.
Yeah, one of the events is ones and zeros, and the other one we get paintbrushes and markers and crayons.
And I would also add that it's also a celebration of what has been accomplished. That's a way that people often, in this kind of dark world, and for those of us that suffer to pay attention to the problems, and in contrast to the vast majority that just kind of looks the other way still, unfortunately, is you do want to acknowledge the amazing accomplishments of humanity and the creative whims and just the exceptional accomplishments, which I won't list here. And that's also a positive attribute, and we have to reinforce the good, too. It's not all about complaining and trying to change and describing the dire straight nature of that necessity.
So, Sharleen, can you reveal, well, I'll also remind our listeners that KPFK is the primary media sponsor for the Zeitgeist Media Festival. As well, the Zeitgeist Media Festival is partnered with the LA Food Bank. Again, as a reminder, this is coming up October 4th. Information at zeitgeistmediafestival.org, where you can get tickets. And in a few minutes, we will be giving a ticket giveaway, which is quite exciting. So, Sharleen, I understand when we spoke before this interview, you had explained that of the many entertainers that came last time, some are committed to come but cannot reveal, due to management issues, that they're going to be there until very close to the date. Who can you tell us is going to be there?
Yes, we do have a surprise popular musical talent that's a crowd favorite that we can't reveal due to some promotional restrictions, but that will be a great surprise for the audience.
So Elton John will not tell us that he's going to be there until he may. Okay, go ahead.
But this year we are happy to have a very popular up-and-coming band, the Rooftop Revolutionaries, that gained a lot of popularity in LA. Popular DJ and musical talent, The Siren, filmmaker and musician Ben Stewart,
Excellent.
comedians Lee Camp and Rick Overton.
Oh, Lee Camp, he collaborates with Dennis Trainer, who I collaborate with. We have a show called Acronym TV that plays under the umbrella of the Young Turks. You can get it at acronymtv.something or other. I don't know. But so Lee has done a lot of bits with Dennis. So we're 1 degree of separation. I haven't met him in person, but I'm eager to. And Rick Overton and I have collaborated. We worked on the Kucinich campaign. And so, God, the small world is getting smaller and
Right.
smaller. I just love this.
Yeah,
And half the people listening probably know us anyway. So,
that's
so,
right.
so we've got Lee Camp, Rick Overton.
At Rooftop Revolutionaries, Peter Joseph will be speaking.
Peter, you're going to be there? I love this.
I'm showing up this time. Yeah.
The lucky thing about being in L.A.,
Dragging him out of his
we
apartment.
actually get him at the events.
Yeah.
We have Nomi Abadi, Heather Donovan, Captain Danger, a newcomer named Hakeem. We like to try and expose a lot of the new up-and-coming talent that's socially conscious as well, supporting them, kind of like exposing them to a larger audience sometimes too.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, within the community, we have to leverage our talents, and because when any one of us does good, we can all do good. You know,
Right.
If I had a full-time radio show, I'd gladly bring you guys on and drag you along with my fame. Not that that's coming anytime soon. And I love Captain Danger. I've seen him a number of times over on the west side in Venice, and just hilarious.
Yeah.
That's
really
hilarious.
awesome.
Good satire stuff.
Yeah.
And Mir One, of course. In the
Yeah,
arts.
Mir One, yes, the wonderful painter,
Muralist.
muralist, exactly.
He did the installation over at the restaurant called The Wood on Inglewood and Washington.
In Culver City, that's right.
That just blows me away. And actually, he was with us last year at this show,
That's right.
promoting the Zeitgeist Media Festival. What a great guy and an amazing artist. And if anyone gets a chance to look up Mir One, Mearone, 2 words, and I don't know what his website is, but I'm sure he's simple to find, please do so. We're about to go to a break. When we come back, we're going to announce the email address for the ticket giveaway, and we'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to this special program on KPFK 90.7 FM, 98.7 in Santa Barbara and points north for the Zeitgeist Media Festival coming up October 4th. That's going to be at the Federal in North Hollywood, a suburb of Los Angeles. And people familiar with the Zeitgeist movement are really excited to be listening to this show. I know I've gotten a lot of great feedback. And we promised you a ticket giveaway. So we will have, for the first several respondents, to an email address, we'll get free tickets to the event if you email to mediafestival@thezeitgeistmovement.com. mediafestival@thezeitgeistmovement.com. Now, Shar, how many tickets did you plan on giving away for starters?
We're going to give away 5 pairs of tickets.
5 pairs of tickets. Okay. So back again with this special program of the Zeitgeist Media Festival with Jason Lord, Sharleen Bezegi, and Peter Joseph. So, Peter, I wanted to ask you, right now we're in sort of a hot time. You just turn on the news, and just about the dial is hot. There's so much, malarkey, so much spin, so much action, so much, I don't know what you want to call it. It's enough to make your mind melt. So I don't know if I'm going to get Ebola or the ISIS is going to come and behead me, or ISIL may come and abort my children. I don't know.
Well, there's no shortage of pundits in the fear campaign that's been happening with ISIS.
It's absolutely off the charts. But what drew my attention was the sort of Scotland separation movement, which also inspired which has sort of reinvigorated a movement in Spain for Catalonia, Cartagena. I forget. It shows that I'm really good with geopolitics. That's the thing about radio. You got to have the balls to show that you're an nincompoop.
Well, I'd say that there's a deeply destabilizing trend that has started long ago. With the Arab Spring, I'd say would be the first inkling of it, and what's happening in Scotland, what's been happening in Spain, and all of these European countries and beyond. It seems like it's epidemic, and necessarily so. There's such a loss of integrity when it comes to basic social organization that what would you expect? And you know how I often respond to that, Dutch, and that's what is the system perspective? What does it mean to do these marches? What does it mean to have independence? What does it mean to completely want to overthrow your government? What do you think this type of effect is going to have in the long term? if people don't have proper solutions. It's just going to be the same cycles.
Well, yeah, when the only thing you're shown is answer A, and you're never shown option B, C, D, or E, you think there's only one way of being, and you throw up your hands and you say, well, I guess this is just the way it's going to be. It's the way it's always been. And that's, I would guess, why in school they don't teach about any of the successes of democratic socialist societies or collective work environments or
even beyond that, even just critical causal reasoning.
well, they don't teach reasoning anymore in
Sure.
school. That's been pushed out.
So I guess my point to jump to the punchline is that all it is a wave of anger. In fact, that's a campaign that I'm expecting soon. The wave of anger campaign, because that's really what the whole temper tantrum and all of this stuff comes down to, which is why I think the Zeitgeist movement's work is increasingly becoming more relevant, whether people would see it or not. I think over the course of time, these ideas will instill this train of thought that says true solutions are going to have to come from a technical reorientation, something that we can't see inside the box of traditional politics. And coming back to your notions in this incredible war move that's happening by the West against Syria and Iran and Iraq, through the campaign of ISIS fear, and this is a separate subject, I was blown away. I'm in a spot where I've constructed a small soundstage for a film trilogy I'm working on, and I have the misfortune of walking by TVs occasionally that have CNN on.
Oh, God. Do you feel the vacuum
My
sucking
God.
your intellect away when you walk by?
I mean, I can feel the tension of what the rest of this country and the rest of the world in the West, at a minimum, is being polarized into, being sucked into, and the polarization. I mean, it's unbelievable what they're talking about with respect to what is, in truth, a nominal threat to the majority of people on this planet, and of course the West. There's huge banners of ISIS determined to strike in America, as though that needs to be said, as though there isn't a small pocket of angry people that would like to destroy lots of things and kill lots of people at all times. Meanwhile, not to interrupt you, you have people dying of peanut allergies more than 6,000 times more money is spent on terrorism now than it is for basic health research for things that are killing people every single day unnecessarily. So when you put this thing into a qualification, remove the fear factor, the shock and awe of the media, you have amazing neuroses and propaganda system that continues to coerce people intellectually and psychologically to fear things that are absolutely irrational and disproportionate to all the things that truly threaten their lives.
Well,
So-
you'll always see the headline, ISIS prepared to strike in the United States, but you won't ever see the headline, minimum wage workers prepared to strike in the United States.
Sure. You won't see the headline, 600 million people killed in the past 50 years due to structural economic violence. You'll see a guy get his head cut off, which is a horrible thing to see. Horrible, and it does stir up emotion. I can see why people get angry. But that isn't political justification for any type of move against what is a small group of really angry people. And I hate to say it, rightfully so. If you went into Iraq and destroyed everything and wanted to breed hatred and terrorism, the United States did everything right. If they wanted terrorists to really threaten, they did a recipe to create more hatred and generate real threats to the extent that it's real, meaning it's still in the minority statistically. But yeah, there's going to be real active terrorism in a way that's never happened because of what the United States has done. So people should keep that in mind.
Well, people rarely step back, look at the macro, and look at what has fomented this action. First of all, is it that significant that some radical, some nutcase in a land, the other side of the planet, has beheaded an American citizen? Is that the end of the world? It's a horrible, horrible thing, without doubt. Is that the end of the world? No. What fomented that? Let's look at how we, the United States government and other Western governments, have gotten together and created this environment and created these organizations. You know, if it weren't for us, there wouldn't be Al-Qaeda. If it weren't for us, there wouldn't have been Mujahideen. If it wasn't for us, there wouldn't have been. We started the whole snowball, and we use it to our benefit. So then we can react and sell the weapons, sell the bullets, and create the fear, and put more cameras up and scan more people at the airports. And it gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yep.
And the NSA. And so this is perhaps some of the retraction of that, this frustration and people looking for solutions.
Yeah.
And
I have to bring up, since we're talking about really a superficial arrangement, meaning that everything that we're seeing, and even with our awareness of it, which is highly more detailed and conscious than the vast majority of what you'll see on television regarding any of these issues, we still have to remember what's causing this massive propensity for conflict. I can't emphasize enough, people need to think about the core premise of the economic model and this propensity towards war and conflict, this necessity towards it, meaning that if you go back to two fundamental historical premises that emerged in early Europe, Malthusianism, the idea that there isn't enough to go around, the idea that human population will always exceed resources, as Malthus, who was hired by the British East India Company to do the first survey of the world's resources, and this highly distorted assessment was made with bad science that said humans reproduce exponentially and resources and our ability to harvest resources can only increase geometrically. Therefore, you have a mathematical proof, and if those that didn't hear that, I put that in parentheses, that we will always have death, that we should always be tolerant of poor people dying, we'll always have poverty, and we'll always have war, because there's not enough to go around. So, I mean, that's the basis. And then you couple that in with a gross distortion of Darwin and the social Darwinism. Again, the parentheses are in the air, no one can see those on the radio. This idea, I mean, Darwin, if you read Darwin, he was not promoting survival of the fittest in human culture whatsoever. It was this grand bastardization that occurred with all these crude economic and social theorists after Darwin. And Darwin's perversion is the idea that now we just have to survive and conquer. So the Malthusian aspect plus the Darwinistic, socially Darwinistic aspect has generated this machine of oppression and slavery and war. I mean, I know somewhere deep in the annals of war theory, I've never seen it, but I know it's got to be there. Someone was saying, you know what, let's just take the poor of the world and force them to fight. And let's wipe them out through war. I mean, all the evidence points to this type of thinking. So, you know, it's no mistake that throughout American history, it's the poor that have been put into war, that have been made the soldiers. And who do we kill the most in these wars today? The poor of the world. It's a natural development of what it means to navigate society, keep power, address the uprisings that will naturally occur from deprivation, and use power to squash them. And this is the world that we live in. So ISIS is not just a consequence of America's imperialism, it's a consequence of this multi-generational millennia of distorted thinking about what it means to live, to coexist in one habitat.
Indeed, and as another small piece of that puzzle, this dawned on me just the other day as I looked at the map and listened to the news about the uprisings in the Middle East and Ebola in Africa and Central and South America political uprisings. I realized that the colonization from Western European powers of each of those regions, the Middle East, Africa, all of the Americas, all of those maps were drawn by those colonizers. So they determined that this line's going to go through the middle of the Pashtun region, dividing an entire people, not willy-nilly, based on their own wealth desire. And then we're going to cut off this chunk of the Andes and make this Brazil and that Peru. And they're erroneous lines that completely disregard the people that have been there since the beginning of humanity. And now feels like the pushback from that, whether it snowballs into a complete a changing of borders is doubtful. So here's a question that I have for you. Again, we're talking about the Zeitgeist Media Festival that's coming up here in Los Angeles at the Federal in North Hollywood on October 4th. And again, for information on that, go to www.zeitgeistmediafestival.org. And again, we're here with Zeitgeist movie filmmaker, writer Peter Joseph, also Jason Lord, the California State Coordinator for the Zeitgeist Movement, and you've been here since the very beginning. Not only the beginning of the show, but the beginning of the movement.
Yes, top of the hour as well as top of the movement.
And Sharleen Bezegi, who's been a national coordinator for the film releases, global releases of Zeitgeist events.
She's been an international coordinator.
International coordinator, yes, absolutely. And multinational. No, that's a bad word. That's a corporation that has no home base and no loyalty and is trying to kill us all. So that's something else.
Definitely
entirely,
not Shar.
Entirely, no, Shar's. She's on our side.
She's very sweet.
She's very much on our side. We're coming up on a break, so we won't get too in-depth. But Shar, I wanted you to just hit some highlights. I know there's been some real notable personalities that have shown up in the past 3 Zeitgeist Media Festivals, and perhaps you can remind us of who some of these great personalities have participated.
Yes, absolutely. We've had Lily Hayden, very popular
Violinist, right?
violinist, yes.
And easy on the eyes.
And she's been called the Jimi Hendrix of violin, yes. And
I believe it.
And also,
Amazing.
of course, Abby Martin of RT.
Oh, yes.
Journalist.
Fantastic.
And Marianne Williamson, the best-selling author, and ran for Congress this last...
She's fantastic.
And then also Rutger Hauer, the actor, of course.
Rutger Hauer.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. I can't remember the movie, but I just have him locked in my mind.
Blade Runner.
Blade Runner. Oh, my God, he was great in that.
Yeah.
So intense.
That's his claim to fame.
So a combination of filmmakers, musicians, performance artists, painters, and speakers.
So at the event, I know we can expect to see musicians, rock bands, comedians, poets. What are some of the other things that we're going to experience in the time that we're there?
Each other. People.
That's
There it
social.
is.
It's partying with a purpose.
Yeah.
Or, the place for socially conscious entertainment and community. Basically, everyone involved is socially conscious. So
A chance to connect with other like-minded people, share ideas.
It's also
and
the format shift, too.
that's right.
Format shift from a big stage-based focus and then to more of the art gallery communal type of feel.
So this one, less of a big rock concert, big stadium city. This is going to be a more intimate affair, more installations. Is that?
And more areas for people to actually engage each other.
Yeah.
We realize that part of this is to generate the community in and of itself. So we have areas outside, if you want to elaborate on that a little bit.
Right. So basically, the entire venue is going to be an art gallery as well. So it isn't fixed seating where you're just sitting stationary and looking at the stage. There is some seating, but it's more of a mingling thing so that you can be entertained, watch what's on the stage, but also look around, go out to the balcony. We'll
Interact.
Exactly. Artist table, the Zeitgeist table with progressive information and materials, and then just socialize with each other. It's a full restaurant and bar as well, so people have a chance to mingle. I heard a story the other day of someone who hadn't seen the movies, which is unusual, and hadn't heard of the movement, but came to last year's Zeitgeist Media Festival, and now is part of the community because of that. So
Tuned in and turned on.
it tapped in.
Well, thank you very much. This is about to wrap up our first half hour of the special program for KPFK 90.7 FM Los Angeles, 98.7 Santa Barbara, and points north. We've had Sharleen Bezegi, Jason Lord, Peter Joseph, and I've been your host, Dutch Merrick. We'll see you for part 2. Thank you for joining us on KPFK 90.7 FM. This is special programming to promote the Zeitgeist Media Festival coming up here in Los Angeles at the Federal in North Hollywood, California, October 4th. Is that correct? October 4th?
That's
I got
correct.
the date right.
That's
Fantastic.
correct. Saturday, October 4th.
This is part 2 of a series interviewing filmmaker, writer, director Peter Joseph, also Jason Lord and Sharleen Bezegi from the Zeitgeist Movement. I'm your host, Dutch Merrick, and for the next half hour, we're going to be talking about some pretty amazing topics. You're going to want to buckle your seatbelt. We'll discuss things like a resource-based economy. We'll delve into alternate economic systems, social systems. Well, within a half hour, we plan to change the world, and then by the next show, we may cure cancer.
Exactly.
So that's step 2. I'll start by reintroducing, if you missed part 1, we have with us Jason Lord, who for the last 6 years has been the California State Coordinator for the Zeitgeist Movement. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you very much. Nice to be back. Thank you.
And I have it on good authority that this is popping your radio cherry.
Oh, my goodness. Well, not KPFK for sure. This is my first time on KPFK, so it's great to be here.
That's great. But you work in television full-time?
I work in TV and film full-time. I have a background in audio and music. I play piano. I've been making albums for other people for like a decade. producing, mixing. But my day job, since we all seem to need to have one in this current economic climate, is lighting for the studios here in our hometown here, Hollywood. And yeah.
Well, it's interesting to discover that you and Peter Joseph have sort of a common thread there in music as perhaps a passion and an underlying skill, and then using your media skills to try to unjack the world is my phrase.
Yeah, I'm good at cleaning up his errors on his guitar solos.
Also joining
Just
us,
kidding.
there are
Chapman stick. Sorry.
also joining us is Sharleen Bezegi, who is the international coordinator for film releases. She's the production coordinator of the Zeitgeist Media Festival and has been an integral force in keeping these events together, getting them on the ground, bringing all the talent together. Welcome, Sharleen.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Dutch.
It's good to see you again. I know that you have a lot on your plate, so thank you for being able to join us tonight. And also special guest who I've alluded to, I told you about, Peter Joseph, who I don't even know where to start as far as your credits, Peter, but from a fella that started as a really accomplished musician, and this is my understanding, so I'll paraphrase it in my own version,
Okay.
that you had created sort of a visual art piece and were asked to put that online because it was really impactful, and that turned into this film Zeitgeist, and people just went ape. And how many million hits on Google before they yanked it?
It was, well, they cut their counters for some random reason. But before it all closed down, well, before there was an updated version that went out, but it was 100 million.
100 million
Right.
registered views before they stopped the counter.
And they just reset it for some odd reason. which
Yeah,
was-
odd reason, my butt. But anyway, back on track. So Peter Joseph, you had wrote and directed this film. It wasn't intended to be a film at
Right.
all. It was this art piece. And due to that outcry, you created Zeitgeist Addendum.
That's correct.
And the second film, and then the third film in the trilogy, Zeitgeist Moving Forward.
Right.
And these, as a package, have really spurred the Zeitgeist movement, which has gotten people talking and engaging and looking at alternative means, alternative societal methods and economic methods and things like that. Am I
That's
correct?
right. Let's attempt to galvanize existing audience and really try to do some good work, which we all know needs to be done.
And what I understand to be your most recent output is the book that I'm holding. It's called The Zeitgeist Movement Defined, and
Yep.
you're a co-author on that.
Because of general controversy with my filmmaking style and some of the more taboo subjects, the film trilogy really isn't a representative of the movement. It was an inspiration for it. It's still my own personal work and artistic expression. And that book that you mentioned, that is the Zeitgeist Movement Defined. So for those out there that are curious about the Zeitgeist Movement, you can read this book for free online. You can download the PDF for free, and it is available in nonprofit paperback. And that's the way I suggest people learn about the movement at this point.
Wow, to look at a future nonprofit society by not trying to make a profit, that's revolutionary in itself.
It's tough.
Again, the Zeitgeist Media Festival coming up October 4th. If you want to find out more information or get some tickets, you go to www.zeitgeistmediafestival.org. And Zeitgeist is spelled Zeitgeist, and then mediafestival.org. Very simple. Now, before we get into too deep into this half-hour program, I'm going to remind our audience we will be doing a ticket giveaway. So hang on for that. You'll have a chance to get some free tickets to the show. The show runs from 6 p.m. to 11 p.m. On a Saturday night, so everybody's off, and it's going to be fantastic. So what I'm going to do, again, I have a copy of this book, The Zeitgeist Movement Defined, your book, Peter, and I'm just going to sort of stick my thumb into it.
A random page.
A random
Excellent.
page. And here we are. It says, Part 4, The Zeitgeist Movement, page 288. This is a big book, by the way. This is an accomplishment. It says, Social Destabilization and Transition. And I'm just going to read the first paragraph, and it's a quote by Martin Luther King Jr. A good pick here. It says, and this is quoting him, I am convinced that if we are to get on the right side of the world revolution, we must undergo a radical revolution of values. We must rapidly begin the shift from a thing-oriented society to a person-oriented society. When machines and computers, profit motives, and property rights are considered more important than people, the giant triplets of racism, extreme materialism, and militarism are incapable of being conquered. Dr. Martin Luther King. Wow.
Yeah, it's amazingly timely.
That was a good random pick, I think. Yeah. I'm not a religious guy, but maybe the good Lord put my hand in that spot. But I mean, Martin Luther King seems like he's talking today about what's going on in the news this afternoon.
Because these problems have been with us for a long time. They've been with us as long as the system's been with us. I delved into a book on language and semantics and learning about communication, and it was published in 1932. And all of a sudden I come across technological unemployment, which is a term that I learned and I came to understand through my exposure with the Zeitgeist movement, my education here, reading Jacques Fresco's work or Buckminster Fuller's work. It's also referenced in the Zeitgeist movement defined, and I'm like, wait a second, this is 1932. And they're talking about technological unemployment. So these problems have been with us they're not new. That's why you can pull out quotes and it'll sound like they're speaking right now. Yeah. And that, is also why we probably later we'll get into talking about, why is that? Just like there's something we're not looking at, which is where we'll come into talking about the system view, which is pointing out these things not as anomalies like the warfare or the poverty in the world or the crime rates that you might see or the low reading levels or the amount of obesity in a society or the unemployment in a society or how much waste and pollution we have to deal with, and the plastic in the ocean and the rest of it. It's like if we fight these all as individual separate anomalies, as problems, as we like to call them, it'll never end, and we're going to keep having them. We keep having them for a reason. That's why you can pull out a quote from Martin Luther King Jr. and have it sound current. There's something going on here with the system that we live inside of. And that kind of blows the minds of a lot of people because we're not used to thinking that way. We're not used to looking at a social system and thinking of it as an interconnected set of components. We are part of a social system. Our social system is also part of an environmental system, and it's for lack of a better term, we call it enclosed on the biosphere of Earth, the Earth system. You can argue out, you can show how the Earth's connected outwards, but as far as the more immediate sense of where we live, life capacity is contained within the atmosphere, for all intents and purposes, and that's why we're looking at a system. And your system doesn't change, your problems are going to be the same, no matter how much money you throw at it, no matter how much protest you throw at it. And that changed me radically personally on a personal level, which also points out in the quote there, where it's like a personal change of values. It's like, what do we value? I was walking at work the other day, and I'm not sure what topic somebody was ranting about, but I walked in on the comment, we can't really have that in our society because who's going to pay for it? Mm-hmm. And he was talking about cost, money, and I think they were talking something to do with healthcare. And I stepped up and, the two people arguing, the one on the cost side stopped for a moment. And I said, well, if you put everything on with a price tag on it, we'll all be dead by the time, we come around to coming up with a monetary solution.
Yeah, what will that cost?
It's
put
like,
a price on that.
When do you enter in other costs? When you enter in the human well-being, when you enter environmental integrity, when do these costs come into the picture? And they do when you start taking on a systems approach, a systems view.
And in that context, I'll add that when it comes to what cost means, when it comes to this price mechanism, when it comes to the intention within this market economy, efficiency and sustainability and abundance and peace are completely diametrically opposed to everything that generates or moves money, I should say. Peace is not affordable in the sense that you really had this type of stability, you would lose billions of dollars in people trying to counter all of the war that's being created with no avail, obviously, because it's a self-cycling phenomenon that can't end because of the nature of the system in and of itself. I want to go back to that quote, though, by King to point out that I really wish he was still alive, because by the end of his life, he realized that it wasn't just about racial bigotry, it was a system problem. And he was pushing for universal guaranteed income. He was pushing for all of these things that made him, people tried to label him a communist or being a communist sympathizer. And these things were really profound, even in the civil rights movement back then. And he was one of the few that really went that far. Everyone was so caught up in the hatred and the animosity back then. He really was able to move beyond that. It's really unfortunate that he's not alive right now, because he would have done a lot more really good work. But I want to go back to the system concept and just elaborate, because I think the great flaw in human culture is its lack of systems thinking. Now, we think categorically, right? This is a microphone, this is a table, and we see things, we compartmentalize them.
Well, you may think categorically. I'm kidding.
You know, there is a basic evolutionary psychology to dividing the world up. We live in a continuum. The very fact that you can understand words is pretty incredible. Like we can separate things. It's ridiculous how we can comprehend, even though if you looked at a waveform of audio, it's just this big blob of stuff, but yet we can understand it. So there's a plus to that, but it's also a double-edged sword because we compartmentalize, we draw labels. We see people with a certain ideological identification. We stamp them with a label.
Everything is the other. It's
Exactly.
not us. We're not of this material, of this same energy and matter. It's other than me.
Yes, it's a us and them generating type of mentality, or this and that generating type. I can't think of a better other word, than categorical thought. And when you have a categorically based comprehension system, you usually avoid anything that relates to interconnectivity in a broader systems context. And this is the great tragedy, because we think in nations, we think as individuals, we have a market economy that promotes the idea that it's all up to you. I mean, that's the whole propaganda of market capitalism, is that it's an equal playing field, apparently. And as long as you work really, really hard, you have infinite social mobility, you are just as equal as anybody else, and it comes down to your ethic. And that's completely faulty. There's a huge, massive system, a structure, not conspiratorially created, but a natural gravitation through competition, advantage, and self-interest. It's created this overarching structure that does limit, that does oppress, that you cannot get out of just by your own attempt to be really dedicated and work hard.
Do you mean to tell me that the heirs to the Walmart fortune didn't just work harder than I did, and that's why they have countless billions? That's because that's what I've been told.
It seems
all
like
these
common
years.
sense, obviously, but I think people, they forget the system basis of this problem, and they start to blame people, and they get mad at the billionaires. They get mad at the, I mean, what is it? The top 100 billionaires can solve global extreme poverty 4 times over, right? Now you hear that and you're like, why don't they do it? And that goes to another point, systems evaluation. If you live in a system that rewards status based on material gain, and you have this natural propensity to want to protect yourself for the future, which we call greed, right? So all greed is this idea that if you want more and more and more, there's a moral relativism that says, oh, once you have X number of million, you must just be really greedy. No, they create new lifestyles, and they want to prepare for the future. They say, okay, I'm saving for my kids. Okay, I'm saving for my grandkids. So it's a self-feeding rationalization where you can have a trillionaire, and he has rationalized this thing entirely based on the system incentives that are around him. So I am so exhausted by the activist community when it comes to this stuff, because they don't think in terms of causality based on the incentive structure or the actual mechanics of the socioeconomic system. But I'll leave it at that for now.
Wow, we hit on some great buttons. I mean, this is the kind of show that feels like it can go for 8 or 9 hours or become a series.
Sure.
There's so much to delve into, but we have to kind of keep on track. Again, this show is a special for KPFK 90.7 FM as a media partner with the Zeitgeist Media Festival coming up this October 4th, where there's going to be music and artists and interactive displays and a chance for people to share ideas about a society that is doable, a society that is not only sustainable, but it is attainable. And I think that's the important message. For more information, go to www.zeitgeistmediafestival.org. And Zeitgeist, for the listeners, is ZEITGEIST, zeitgeistmediafestival.org. After the quick break, we will offer a ticket giveaway for several of our listeners. So hang with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Thank you for joining us on KPFK 90.7 FM Los Angeles. This is a special program for the Zeitgeist Media Festival 2014, happening October 4th. With us in studio, Sharleen Bezegi, who's the production coordinator for the event, who is pulling all of the amazing talent singers, musicians, comedians, artists together, which is a heck of a job, by the way. I've been there for the last 3 years, and just a lot of effort goes into that. Additionally, with us is Jason Lord, California State Coordinator for the Zeitgeist Movement, one of the biggest sections or regions of the Zeitgeist Movement, and filmmaker and reluctant founder, if you will, of the Zeitgeist Movement is Peter Joseph here live in studio, and I'm your host, Dutch Merrick. Back to our conversation with Peter Joseph. One of the themes of the Zeitgeist Movement from the films that you created is the concept of a resource-based economy. Is that right? Mm-hmm. So, and it seems to me that we have a planet that's finite. It means it has an end. It's a circle. You can't just keep going and expanding. You're kind of limited to a ball. And our economic systems are currently based on ever-expanding growth. We're going to have more sales, more consumption, create more trash. What is, and most people, especially in the United States, don't see any alternative to that. They're presented with one way. They watch a Gap commercial or an electronics commercial that says, buy another phone, throw your last one in the trash. You need this new technology, and just keep consuming more and more and more. Yep. What is the resource-based economy about?
I'll add one thing to that observation that I hope I can phrase properly. I want to point out the schizophrenic nature of what the system is. In one proposition, the market system is a scarcity-oriented framework that favors infinite consumption.
Wow, is that a contradiction or what?
It's based on this idea there's enough to go around, therefore price values must regulate, and you can't just distribute equally, and all the other ethics that go along with that work, and right to life, and blah, blah, blah. And then simultaneously, it requires constant purchase and turnover to keep people employed. So anyone out there that wants to know the mass contradiction and why the system's so flawed, that's pretty much the only proposition you need.
Well, and they can use that leverage, just that logic to say, hey, if you lost your job, that's a good thing. It's part of the system. Go find another job.
If only we were that rational.
Turnover.
As far as the resource-based economy, which has a number of different terminologies associated with it, I prefer the term natural law resource-based economy because I've had
let's say that slowly.
Natural
law resource-based economy. Okay.
The reason I add the natural law is because anything could be a resource-based economy in theory, and I've had some people arguing, become very confused by that, and say, well, our economy is based on resources. We use resources. And also the word natural law is really the ultimate qualifier because there is a natural law. We don't know everything about the world. There's plenty of mysteries, but what we have learned about nature is that there are clearly laws. I can't just, on my own whim and sense of freedom, walk on this wall and walk up on the roof without some kind of aid. So there are laws to sustainability. There are laws to public health. We have evolutionarily dictated forms. We know what happens when we abuse children. Biopsychosocial phenomenon. Biopsychosocial means biological, sociological, and psychological, and that is this, again, the systems comprehension notion of what actually makes us and how we think and how we operate and how we maintain good health and the like. Right. So with all of that said, that's why the qualifier is there. The resource-based economy is nothing new. It's a concept that started in the early 20th century, in a lot of ways I would say it goes back to early Native American cultures and its core value, and that's simply recognizing sustainability. Imagine that. Simply understanding that you live on a finite planet in a finite environment and respecting the natural equilibrium. So you start with that. And then you start to realize that the undercurrent of all of our social development is technology. I mean, right now we're surrounded by people with cell phones and Twitter, and our lives are literally been altered dramatically by this.
The twits with cell phones are altering my life as we speak.
And clearly the economic structure has been absolutely affected by technology, along with every other social structure. We could talk about technological unemployment in a moment if you like, which is a part of this train of thought, this reasoning. But the very basic concept of sustainability, coupled with using tools, which is technology, to generate the highest optimized condition for human culture is nothing new. The first attempt of this was a group called Technocracy. Now, none of these were perfect, but they attempted to use what they called scientific reasoning. They had a bunch of different ideas that don't really hold up today, but they were there. And a very influential man named Jacques Fresco emerged from something called Technocracy in parallel with another very influential man called Buckminster Fuller. These two guys were about a generation apart, about 30 years apart. they proceeded to do a lot of great work on this idea simultaneously in different variants. And they influenced another spectrum of many people that are too numerous to list that also attempted to think about what a scientifically managed society actually means. Now, of course, you say that, people freak out and they think Orwellian stuff, they think science, they think eugenics, they think Hitler. And remember that science has only really been with us in a social application in the sense of our awareness of public health and the like for maybe 50, 60 years, if you really think about it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been so feared and religion has been so powerful that it's taken a long time. So in that sense, it is new, but it still goes back to basic sustainability principles. What is it? It's a way of managing society in a systems context that uses a train of thought that says, what can we do to assure that people live healthy lives, are in good mental health, and avoid mental illness? What can we do to assure we don't run out of any resources, but yet maintain an optimum level to provide for as many people as possible? Remember, in the current model, it's not actually a good thing economically to provide for everybody. People need deficiency. The system needs deficiency.
The system needs deficiency.
And that's what keeps this whole process of want going, which is now we've come into an age where we really can make enough for everybody as far as needs. Now we force wants. I mean, most corporations spend more money on advertising than they do on anything else. Car companies spend more money on advertising than they do on actually building cars.
I've heard it said that I had bought a major brand truck many years ago, and I was told that that company I bought it from spent more money making me feel good about my previous purchase than anything else, was that I can feel good and identify with that product as a brand. I won't even say the brand. I'm almost embarrassed now. But that psychology.
Yeah, it's amazing. It really is a distortion. It plays, as an aside, it plays on our social nature. It says that we value each other, we want to respect each other, and then it throws in this curveball that says, oh, well, you better get some money and buy some cool stuff, or I'm not going to respect you or hold you in any esteem.
Are you familiar with Adbusters magazine?
Of course, yeah. They started Occupy, or they triggered it.
They triggered Occupy.
Yeah.
Adbusters magazine, for those not in the know, started by editor Kale Lawson, was a commercial art director. Now, I work in television commercials, so this is sort of near and dear to my heart. This is a guy that for years made his money selling products and telling you that if you don't drive a X brand car, that you're not sexy enough, and if you don't use this perfume, and et cetera, et cetera. And it dawned on him that what he was doing was bad, and it was antithetical to human survival. So he and many like him from the commercial field are using the same skill set to unswoosh is one of their campaigns to get rid of the sort of Nike swoosh mentality and to offer new memes and new ways of thinking. So sort of to get your brain back on track.
Yeah. And I would say this, I mean, we finally, after this epic distortion of value where we want more and more and more, and this idea of infinite wants, if you can't think of a more distorted idea than that, we finally reached the point where people are saying, you know what? We've got to do something about preservation and efficiency given the state of the planet, given that in a 2002 report, it was noted that due to resource overshoot and biodiversity loss, we're going to need 27 more planets by 2050 by the time the population reaches 9.5 billion. These are true, ridiculous realities that we have in store, which can be resolved if efficient processes are set in motion. And that's really what this whole concept is about. What is the most efficient means? And I'll just add one more thing about this value system distortion since you brought it up and I can't let it go. I envision finally a mature culture that doesn't want property. Think about a world of access where I don't have to have
Native Americans.
Sure. Well, but in the sense, though, in a more modern sense, in the context that you have ability to gain the usefulness of whatever you need for whatever purpose, but you don't actually marvel at the acquisition ever again. In fact, you don't want it because you're free. You can move around the planet, you can gain access to things, you don't have this baggage, you don't have luggage, you don't have any of the stuff. Obviously, you might have something, but you know what I'm saying. You don't have, I moved recently, it's taken me 3 months to get my life back in order after
the
one
belongings
move.
and
With the film equipment, I mean, the stuff that I have to invest in, I can't just rent it. I can't afford to rent it all the time. I use it too frequently.
It reminds me of the model of the bicycle lending system in Scandinavia.
Sure.
I forget what that's called.
Yeah, well, they have that in New York now, luckily too. So the seed's been planted, and eventually people are going to look at the billionaires with the huge mansions as just that, a form of social cancer, an irresponsibility. Not them particularly, but the value system they represent, the entire American dream of this idea of mass acquisition, and success by mass acquisition will finally be perceived as the caustic insanity that it really is. And that's why I think the movement's work and this advocacy of a natural law resource-based economy is in its infancy, but it's right on the cusp of actually really gaining traction.
Well, I tell you, the marketing worked on me because I moved in the last year, and just baseball caps. Now, as like an average middle-aged, middle-class white guy, I was drawn to them like a moth to a flame. Every sporting event, every concert, every, whatever it was, I had to get the hat or the hat and the shirt. And I went through boxes and boxes of what is just crap. Pardon my French, but
I hear you.
it's junk. But I had to have it at $15 a pop, and I can't imagine the hundreds of dollars that I spent. A reminder to our audience, we're here with Peter Joseph, writer-director, also Jason Lord and Sharleen Bezegi, all of the Zeitgeist movement, and we're here to talk about the Zeitgeist Media Festival coming up October 4th. It's going to be in North Hollywood, California, here in the LA area at the Federal. For information, go to zeitgeistmediafestival.org. As we near the end of the show, we'll maintain focus and remind people to come on out because this is the fourth time you've done this. Is that right?
Yeah.
And I've participated in these, and the energy level is electric. It seems that the topics that we're bringing up today, that we're just time-bearing, allowed to just touch on, these topics get dealt with in depth at Zeitgeist-type events, and this is where people can share experientially through art and expression. I was listening to a program recently. It was talking about Michelangelo and how he was essentially a scientist and an artist. And I think that this level of science and philosophy and reasoning needs to dovetail with artistry in order to integrate into the psyche of those listening.
It's all about experimentation and open-mindedness, and critical thought without the interest in experimentation and open-mindedness has no place. You just end up dogmatic. So the arts and the sciences are alloys, in the words of famous composer Ioannis Xenakis, who was a big influence of mine, who was a early 20th century modern composer who developed the first computers that could translate architecture into sound. And he would build his actual pieces of music physically. They exist in France. Amazing mind.
Wow.
He didn't really have the social element, but he saw this fusion in what was later called consilience, which is the merging of all knowledge. If anyone's not familiar with the word consilience, there's a great book by Edward O. Wilson on that subject, which goes back to that systems awareness. All the great scientists out there have been wonderful artists. Arthur C. Clarke, who invented satellite, wrote all those incredible sci-fi books. Einstein played the violin, of course, has the famous art quote. There's no shortage. I mean, you really can't be a progressive developer without this immense. Nikola Tesla, my God, what a creative mind that guy was. If you ever read any of his biographies, he was on the border of complete insanity, given his fascination with what he wanted to accomplish. But a lot of the stuff that he's talked about has come true.
Well, yeah, he's probably one of the better examples. He was experimenting with essentially transmitting energy through the air was one of his most notorious experiments. But when you wave a speed pass through your gas station to pay for your credit card, you're doing a similar thing. There's no energy in that, but it's utilizing energy that's just in the air from some device. So it happens in our everyday life. But these are the systems that are not allowed to go full scale to really rise all boats, as it were, and make this a sustainable planet.
Right.
Well, as we approach the final part of the part 2 of our show on the Zeitgeist Media Festival, I want to thank you all for being here and encourage people to check out the Zeitgeist movie trilogy and to check out the book, The Zeitgeist Movement Defined, available hopefully in finer bookstores, but you certainly find it online. And you can read it for free because the intention is not to make money.
If you go to the zeitgeistmovement.com, the main global Zeitgeist website, the book is there for PDF download. If you visit any of the chapter sites around the world for the movement, you'll most likely find a copy of the PDF there also. It's easy to find, and if you really want to get a hands on a physical copy that you can tear into, there are links there for, I think, if it's still the same, Lulu, Book Patch, and Amazon.
And there's the Kindle, too, if people want to download it. So.
Yeah.
Jason, you make an important point. This is a worldwide movement. Is there an estimate of how many people are involved with this now?
I don't have a number in front of me. I deal locally and with my region, and I'll pass on information for what I know here locally. And the other thing, it's really hard to keep track of. Look, you're talking about a zeitgeist. Okay, I'm going to take that word and use it. You're talking about an idea. And when people are exposed to this information and they start changing their worldview, I don't know how to count that in just mere numbers of people signed up on a website. Like, I could say, oh, well, I administer the California chapter site, and it's 3,000 people on the mailing list, here in the state. But I don't know how representative that is, because you're talking about a social movement. So you'll start to see that in the outcomes, in society, and as the waves of anger come through, and as we change our methods.
The global website is 530,000 subscriptions for just an email
That's
list.
subscribers, so you got to figure there's a lot more than that.
Yeah, wherever I go somewhere, I meet people that are so familiar with it, but yet they don't go to a website.
Right.
They've learned something, they've watched a movie, and they've engaged. And I think that's sort of that's the real face of it. It's
being affected, but not necessarily signing up for something.
Exactly. And some people in this world just don't like that type of group identification. I found that as well. A lot of people, they just choose not to identify. They agree. And I think they would be active if push came to shove. But there's probably millions and millions and millions of people that work on that level that are aware.
I think push is coming to shove if you read the news. Lastly, Sharleen, can you remind our listeners some of the talent that will be present at this upcoming Zeitgeist Media Festival, October 4th?
Yes, I'd be happy to. We have the award-winning comedian Rick Overton and comedian Lee Camp, who you know
Both
well.
very funny, yes.
Yes. The local band Rooftop Revolutionaries. We've got Nomi Abadi. She's a singer-songwriter. Ben Stewart, the filmmaker of Climactica and Esoteric Agenda, and also of Hierosonic. Heather Donovan, the Siren. Hakeem, Captain Danger. Mir One, the artist. And then a surprise, very popular guest will be appearing in Musical Talent. We also are doing a food drive, so for participants to be reminded to bring, a can of food or some non-perishable item. We like to do something to support the local community as well.
That's fantastic. Think globally, act locally. Thank you very much, Sharleen, Jason, and Peter Joseph. I've been your host, Dutch Merrick,
Thank
on
you, Dutch.
KPFK 90.7 FM. Thank you so much for joining us.